When you buy a digital game, you assume you own it. But right now, sitting on a server in Montreal is a kill switch, a piece of code specifically designed to wipe a game you paid for like it never existed. No warning, no refund, just gone. The gaming industry told the European Union that stopping this switch is a technical impossibility that would cost millions. That's not just wrong, it's a lie. And a small group of rogue engineers just proved that you can save these games for almost nothing. So why won't the industry do it? Like every good mystery, this one starts with a murder. Chapter 1: The Execution of the Crew. Ubisoft revealed exactly how they feel about their players on March 31st, 2024. That was the day they flicked the kill switch on The Crew, an online-only competitive racing game that had been running for almost a decade. Just like that, it was gone. Millions of players were suddenly locked out with no way back in. The reason? Upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. It was typical vague corporate talk, and that might have held water if Ubisoft had just shut down the servers. They kept going. In April that same year, Ubisoft began revoking player licenses via their Ubisoft Connect service. They used digital rights management, or DRM, to prevent gamers from downloading or keeping any of the game files, sometimes without providing any kind of refund. For people who don't play as many online games, think of it like going to a restaurant and ordering a sandwich. You take a bite and you're halfway through enjoying it. When the chef walks out of the kitchen, he grabs the sandwich and eats it in front of you. And even more insane, this is somehow happening to everyone in the restaurant at the same time. But this is more than a company with a questionable history scamming their customers out of $60 to $80 a piece. It is an extremely dangerous precedent to set for the entire gaming industry. One fan on Reddit said, "This was the saddest and most ruthless decision I've ever seen in gaming history." Another called it abhorrent behavior that needs to stop being legal. And as Engadget put it, it's a reminder that we as consumers own nothing. We're living in a world where streaming services can just remove a beloved series because it's taking up too much attention away from their expensive new releases. Or a studio executive can snap his fingers and make a movie disappear for a tax write-off. Could a move like this push video games down the same slippery slope? This isn't internet paranoia. Earlier in 2024, Philippe Tremblay, the director of subscriptions at Ubisoft, said in a public statement, "We saw gamers are used to having and owning their games. That is the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game." After all, subscription services make a lot more money for companies than a one-off payment. If they decide they don't want you to play that game anymore or even have access to its files, well, that's a you problem. What are you going to do? Take it to the forums? Review bomb their Steam pages? It's not like they care. But this time, it was different. Ubisoft annihilating The Crew was the straw that broke the camel's back. This time, gamers were going to actually do something about it. Enter Ross Scott, a lifelong gamer and machinimator from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He spent most of his adult life being an outspoken champion of artistic preservation in gaming. In 2019, he called the concept of games as a service rather than a product fraud. And in the fallout of Ubisoft flicking the kill switch on The Crew, he was one of the most outspoken voices against it, describing it, quote, as an assault on both consumer rights and preservation of media. It makes sense that he'd be the one to start Stop Killing Games, a movement with a specific actionable goal in mind: to take this issue into the courts and push for real laws that stop video game publishers from destroying games and leaving customers behind in the name of pure profit. And if there was ever going to be the perfect inflection point, it would be The Crew. It largely functioned as a single-player experience that only had online functionality to preserve its always-on DRM. If the slide couldn't be stopped there, it couldn't be stopped at all. So the battleground for the future of gaming would be the European Parliament. It seemed that Stop Killing Games had a bulletproof case, with millions of signatures from online supporters and a real groundswell of momentum. But the gaming industry had an ace up its sleeve too. Chapter 2: Inside the EU Hearing. On April 16, 2026, Ross Scott and Moritz Katzner took the fight directly to an EU Parliament hearing where they had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to present their case. In just 2 years, it gathered up an unprecedented level of grassroots support from consumers who'd had enough of being treated like pay pigs by the gaming industry. As a European citizens initiative, it had already reached 1.25 million signatures by mid-2025. enough to fill the Roman Colosseum 25 times over. And despite some naysayers in the online community, there was no slowing it. And even though there was a barrier between the technical understanding of the campaigners and that of the EU legislators, it seemed like Ross and Moritz were successfully arguing their case. Consultant Daniel Ondrushka said, "Games that were developed 20 years ago still function. Games that were developed 3 years ago don't. It's a design decision. It's a business decision." In one sentence, Ondrushka cut to the core of the dark truth here. It's not about inherent limitations in running certain kinds of games. It's about the looming specter of planned obsolescence. Ross touched on the tiny portion of a game's budget that's designated for end-of-life planning, but that those numbers are often inaccurate due to factoring in features that aren't applicable to offline games. But while the Stop Killing Games movement has the human numbers to make lawmakers sit up and take notice, any fight against multi-million-dollar corporations is going to be an uphill battle. The question is, what kind of justification could they possibly give for their anti-consumer practices? The answer is a crafty one. Using an avalanche of technical justifications to overwhelm the conversation, not clarify it. If the language is complex enough, the lawmakers and the public might not be tech literate enough to understand it. The official statement of Video Games Europe read, in part, "Private servers are not always a viable alternative option for players as the protections to secure players' data, remove illegal content, and combat unsafe community content would not exist and would leave rights holders liable. Many titles are designed to be online only." In effect, these proposals would curtail developer choice by making these video games prohibitively expensive to create. There's a lot that's wrong with this, which we'll be able to thoroughly dissect with the secrets we've been able to dig up. But one part stands out as especially weak, because at the core of this issue is a simple idea. Games shouldn't be abandoned without an end-of-life plan to replace DRM online-only functionality. The danger here is that the knowledge imbalance would shake out in favor of the corporate lobbyists. Politicians are skittish and change-averse by nature. If companies can use the idea of an entanglement between the gaming industry and these toxic systems, they might just be able to pull the wool over their political eyes. Nobody wants to be the politician who signed off on an act that ended up collapsing a sector of the economy. That's exactly the fear that they wanted to instill in everyone's minds with this kind of rhetoric. If we want to see the truth hidden inside all the self-serving corporate spin, we need to look at the code inside the games. Chapter 3. The Anatomy of a Kill Switch. Switching off a game and its servers isn't like packing it up in a box and going home. It's more like trying to cut the right wires while defusing an active bomb. One wrong move and you could compromise a number of games that you still want to suck money out of. The average online live service game is running a little over 500 microservices and heartbeat pings. Ubisoft alone has data centers around the world with central servers based in Montreal. These carry every active release on Ubisoft's roster, and they're all linked. What does this mean? Simply put, that the kill switch is a lot more complicated for these companies than they'd ever let on, and a lot more expensive. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Untangling this dense web of microservers is the equivalent of knocking down the bottom 20 floors of a skyscraper while hoping that the top 40 remain standing. One wrong move could compromise multiple servers and put millions of dollars into jeopardy. So, why take the risk? Servers, especially with microtransactions, can still be profit-generating ventures. Shuttering a live service game and revoking all the licenses will alienate paying customers in the process. Is it worth it? Clearly, there are forces at work here that we don't understand. Motivations and incentives hidden behind the classic excuse, "It's just too expensive to keep a system like this running." Still, the Stop Killing Games movement isn't even asking the games industry to provide server support in perpetuity. One of Stop Killing Games' requests is that every live service game has an end-of-life plan. It means a game could be patched up to enjoy offline, or independent developers can have the tools to open their own servers. This is yet another thing that every company seems to have 1,000 excuses for. Adding functionality like this will fundamentally alter the development process, not to mention add millions to the cost of development. And we might be sympathetic to that if we didn't already have the ultimate evidence to the contrary. Chapter 4. The Velan Blueprint. All the arguments about it being impossible for major publishers like Ubisoft to release open-source tools start to fall apart the moment you look at what's already been done. because a far smaller studio, Velan Studios, has already done it, and they won the hearts of gamers everywhere. When their beloved cult multiplayer Knockout City closed its servers in June 2023, players assumed that this would be yet another promising live service experience getting the sunset treatment. But this time things were going to be different, very different. Rather than making the sunset event a quiet, solemn piece of small print, Velan decided to make the whole thing a huge blowout dedicated to thanking their fans. As part of their send-off, they even did a closing competition with a $25,000 prize. That in and of itself would be a pleasant gesture, but they were about to take it a step further and blow companies 10 times their size out of the water in the process. Before the game was sunsetted, they released it as a standalone Windows executable with private server support. That meant anyone with the know-how could make their own server for free forever. It's enough to give a high-level gaming executive a panic attack. Velan assigned a team of developers to modify the game into its privately hosted version. They removed licensed content, stripped out monetization systems, and reshaped it into something that could live independently. And according to reports, the cost was only around 0.5% of the game's total development budget. The whole process took 3 months, but in the process, it bought the game immortality. Velan Studios' director of marketing, Josh Harrison, thinks it was a worthy investment. He said, "It is the single biggest thing that we did to impact the positive reception of the sunset. It got great press, got great reactions from the players, and it ultimately keeps the game that everybody at the studio worked so hard on alive forever, even with the live servers offline." If an indie development studio could create a sunset patch like this, why can't a billion-dollar company like Ubisoft? When this question is posed, they rarely actually answer. Instead, they change tactics. Chapter 5. The Security Myth. One of the weaker arguments against the Stop Killing Games movement is the claim that releasing open-source patches for sunsetted games would open the door to massive security risks and give hackers a major advantage. One of the leading proponents for this is the controversial game developer and internet personality Jason Thor Hall, otherwise known as Pirate Software. While private servers built from the source code would inevitably have to deal with bad actors, using that as a justification to deny post-sunset patches altogether doesn't hold up. Given the consistent evolution of anti-cheating software between games, it's unlikely that hackers would be able to use it as a roadmap to interfere with games that have active server support. While keeping the code under wraps follows the security through obscurity doctrine, it's often been pointed out that this is actually more an illusion of security than any active measures toward it. The fact is, one of the biggest traps for game developers might just be something that they're embarrassed to even admit. Chapter 6. The Middleware Trap. There's an extremely important part of modern gaming development that we've been tiptoeing around here, and it might just be the key to cracking this whole thing open. Middleware. It's kind of like a bespoke, pre-made bridge between the gaming engine and some of the connected digital features, from animation to sound. Some programmers even compare middleware to a kind of software glue. Think Havok, WWise, Autodesk, and NVIDIA, and this is no small part of the overall pie either. Middleware, licensed by all these external companies, can sometimes make up 15 to 20% of a live service game's codebase. It's where the utopian ideas of the Stop Killing Games movement begin to hit an immovable wall. When it comes to proprietary middleware embedded in the server-side code, not only do the developers not own it, they also don't have the legal right to redistribute it. It's the poisoned pill hiding inside live service code. That means, in the truest sense, not only do you not own the game, the people who sold it to you don't fully own it. These business-to-business contracts are choking out everything and crushing consumer purchasing rights in the process. This practice, inherent in the industry these days, is what's making the state of the live service industry so dire for gamers these days. But we should really ask, how bad is it? Chapter 7. The Survival Rate. As it currently stands, live service games are in a bubble caught mid-pop. 83% of the live service games that have launched since 2020 have shut down within 3 years. Stop Killing Games actually keeps a living record of dead games. As of April 2026, the current tally of games that can't be played in any way sits at 441. In 2026, Sony has severely scaled back its current live service plans thanks to poor returns. How severe? They actually canceled 8 of the 12 promised live service games they were slated to release by 2025. And it isn't just Sony. Across the industry, imploded games have made headlines and include The Cube Save Us, High Guard, Concord, and 2018's Radical Heights. What unites all of these? Despite budgets in the millions, none of them lasted more than 6 months. These games are in the middle of a legitimate existential crisis, a game apocalypse, which will leave years of work from thousands of developers essentially wiped out. Right now, the EU seems like it might be the last line of defense for a generation of digital media. But just how much is really at stake here? Chapter 8: The Final Patch. Right now, we're at a crossroads, not just for the future of gaming, but for digital media as a whole. Are we moving toward a world where paying for something actually means you own it for life, or one where buying is really just renting with extra steps? Because under the current model, every game, movie, or ebook or piece of software can come with a hidden string attached, and at any point that string can be pulled. We'll have a good idea which future we're going to be entering by mid-2026. According to a preliminary agenda published not long after the hearing, July 27th will be the day the Commission officially responds to the legislative proposal. The time between now and then is shaping up to be a real nail-biter, not just for gaming fans, but for digital rights advocates, media preservationists, and the companies trying to maximize their profits. The hearing was stronger than many expected, with Ross and the rest of the team articulating a good case for the moral principles behind the movement, but fate still very much hangs in the balance. If things go well for Stop Killing Games and for gamers in general, it's possible that the movement could help push a sunset standard provision into the upcoming Digital Fairness Act. This is a consumer rights bill designed specifically to protect people in the online space. Under that kind of framework, games released after a certain point wouldn't just launch and vanish into uncertainty. They'd be required to ship with a proper end-of-life plan. Even if server support did end, gamers would continue to own the games they bought in some form. And there's another side to this coin too. There have been some whispers in the Commission about making cuts to the DFA. The worry is that too much regulation would make them less economically competitive with their overseas counterparts. This is a pretty seductive ideology for large corporations, and it's actually responsible for a lot of the erosion of consumer rights stateside. If this philosophy wins out, all of the hard work of Stop Killing Games will come to very little. Ross has said he thinks he has a much better chance with the EU than with courts in the US. Which way will the pendulum swing? Only time will tell. The future is still in our hands for now. What happens next may decide what owning anything in the digital world even means. This is just the tip of the video game industry's nefarious activities. Find out how sleazy video game companies really are and why EA is terrified to release a new Sims game. Or watch this instead.